The docking bay was silent, eerily so. A dull hum echoed off the metallic walls of the cavernous chamber, punctuated only by the occasional hiss of pressurized doors and the low murmur of far-off machinery. No one had ever seen a ship like the Elysium. It wasn't just its unassuming shape, a bulbous, nearly spherical vessel with mismatched hull plates, but the way it moved. The slow, deliberate pace it had as it eased itself into the docking clamps. It didn't soar, it lumbered. It didn't scream power, it whispered age. On the viewing screen, the alien officials standing on the observation platform exchanged quiet chuckles, their eyes gleaming with bemusement. The Elysium was far from what they had expected. Most of the galaxy had heard rumors of the human ships, heavy, inefficient, and barely capable of interstellar travel. This, however, was absurd. A relic, they thought, maybe from some long-forgotten past. But then the air crackled. A soft hum, almost like a growl, resonated within the bay. The Elysium's engines glowed to life, pulsing rhythmically. Its ramp descended slowly. The alien officials stilled, their smirks fading. In the silence that followed, Captain Mira Sato's boots hit the ramp with a hollow thud. She stepped out of the shadows, walking toward the men and women who dared to mock humanity. With every step, the old ship seemed to breathe life into the moment. She, a small figure in a vast world of strange species and arrogant minds, was about to change everything. Myra's eyes were sharp, scanning the room. It wasn't just the mocking tone they had thrown her way that unsettled her, but something deeper, an undercurrent of dangerous complacency. The aliens here had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated her crew, her ship, and most of all, her people. "You're the humans?" The alien leader, a tall figure with smooth, glassy skin, stepped forward. His voice was clipped, as if he had already decided they were irrelevant. Myra's lips curled slightly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We are," she said, her voice steady, her words clipped as well. She wasn't here for pleasantries. She could feel their gaze, the subtle undercurrent of superiority. To them, humanity was a footnote, a joke, a fleeting mistake in the grand expanse of the galaxy. But they hadn't yet realized that their history of war, conquest, and empires was about to collide with a force they had never encountered. The alien leader tilted his head, as if examining her. "Your vessel doesn't match the descriptions we've received. Where is the power you promised?" Myra's eyes flicked to the ship in the distance, its hull scarred by battle and time. "Power comes in many forms," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "You'll see what we're capable of soon enough." Behind her, the soft rustle of boots echoed as her crew joined her, each one of them looking just as calm as their captain. They were here for more than just an audience. They were here to make a statement. The alien leader narrowed his eyes. "How quaint. Perhaps you'll enlighten us, then, Captain." His tone was dismissive, as though the conversation was already over in his mind. But Myra's eyes darkened. "They still don't get it." "I suggest you prepare yourselves," Mira said, her voice cold and sharp. "The Elysium doesn't play by your rules." The alien leader's smirk never faltered. He didn't believe her. He couldn't. And that, Mira realized, was their undoing. They had no idea what they were about to face. No idea that this ship, this ancient relic, held more power than their combined fleets could ever dream of. With a signal, Mira turned sharply, walking away from the group of aliens. Her crew followed her, silent but resolute. As they disappeared through the doors of the command center, the last thing the aliens saw was the faintest glimmer of confidence in her eyes, a look that spoke volumes. The game is just beginning. Minutes later, in the depths of the Elysium, Mira stood at the central command interface, her fingers flying over the controls. The bridge lights dimmed, and the holographic display lit up before her, a map of the sector's key locations, trade routes, and military outposts. She adjusted a few settings, confirming the coordinates, before tapping a sequence into the console. A low hum reverberated throughout the ship as it powered up, the familiar sensation of the old systems coming to life washing over her. "Everything set, Captain?" Lieutenant Taro asked, his voice as steady as ever. He was her right-hand officer, a calm and calculating presence in the midst of chaos. His sharp eyes never missed a detail. Mira's lips curled again, but this time there was no trace of humor. "We're ready. Let's show them exactly what this primitive ship can do." The Elysium's engines roared, but not in the way most ships did. The sound wasn't the shrill whine of modern tech, it was a guttural, almost visceral growl that shook the room. The energy was primal, raw, and when the engines hummed, the entire ship vibrated in response. Outside, the alien officials' faces drained of color. It was happening. The ship, once dismissed as obsolete, was now taking flight, its engines burning with a fierce energy. The gravity field around it shimmered, an old-school trick the humans had perfected long ago. "On my mark," Mira ordered, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "Activate the weapons array." Her fingers flicked over a sequence of switches, and within seconds, the entire sector was bathed in a sudden, blinding flash. The alien ships in orbit, previously a force to be reckoned with, began to shake, their shields flickering wildly. They had underestimated the humans' ingenuity. This wasn't a vessel designed to impress, it was a weapon, finely tuned for one purpose: survival. As the enemy fleet scrambled to respond, Mira stood still, watching it all unfold. She wasn't just fighting for her ship, her crew, or even for humanity's survival. She was fighting for their place in this galaxy, for a future where humans would no longer be the punchline of alien jokes. A voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we've got their full attention now." Mira's grin was sharp and full of promise. "Let's make sure they remember who they're dealing with." The Elysium shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere, its engines propelling it forward with deadly precision. There was no going back. The fight for humanity's future had just begun. The Elysium surged forward, slicing through the void like a massive beast unfurling its claws. Mira stood at the bridge, her eyes locked on the navigation console. The stars streaked past, swallowed by the ship's shadow as they raced deeper into enemy space. Her crew moved with a practiced precision, the hum of the ship's system settling into a rhythm that mirrored their own focused efforts. Every one of them knew their role in this mission, and every one of them understood the stakes. But Mira felt the pressure weighing on her. It wasn't just the alien fleet that they were up against, but something much darker, a shadow that had been haunting her since she first stepped aboard this ship, the knowledge that humanity's future was on the line, and she might be the one to fail them. Approaching the outskirts of their defensive perimeter, Taro's voice broke through the tension. He stood by the tactical console, eyes scanning data streams that flickered across his screen. "Their ships are starting to move into position." Mira's jaw tightened. The alien forces had underestimated them once, but now they were ready. No more false bravado, this was the real fight. And it was a fight that she and her crew were going to win. The Elysium had been in worse scrapes before, and it always came through, because it had to. "Open comms to the fleet," Mira said, her voice steady. "Let's give them a message they won't forget." Taro hesitated for a moment, then nodded and tapped a few keys. The communications channel buzzed to life, and Mira's voice echoed across the silent bridge. She didn't need to raise her tone. Her presence was enough. "This is Captain Mira Sato of the Elysium," she began, her words cutting through the static like a blade. "If you think humanity is a joke, if you think we're easy prey, then come find out for yourselves. We're not the weaklings you've been told about. We're a force, and we will make you regret every single underestimation." The comms channel went dead for a moment, followed by a torrent of alien chatter. They hadn't expected such a direct response. The audacity of it. They thought they could simply brush aside the last remnants of humanity. Mira's eyes narrowed, and she turned back to Taro. "Target their main ship. We need to cripple their command vessel." Taro's fingers flew over the console, adjusting the targeting systems with mechanical precision. "Aye, Captain. I'm locking onto the Dread's main reactor core. They'll feel this." A dark smile tugged at the corners of Mira's lips. "Good. Fire when ready." The ship's weapons array activated, the ancient cannons hidden within the hull groaning to life. There was no elegant precision to them, The Elysium's weaponry was raw, brutal, and effective. A volley of energy blasts shot toward the enemy ship, erupting in a series of brilliant flashes. The alien ship shuddered under the barrage, its shields flickering and crackling. For a moment, the bridge was bathed in the glow of the explosions. Then, as quickly as it had started, the blast stopped. Mira's gaze remained fixed on the screen. The dread shields were still holding. Just another round, Mira ordered, not missing a beat. Hit them again. Her crew, already anticipating her commands, responded immediately. A second barrage of fire erupted from the ship's cannons. This time, a ripple of energy expanded outward from the enemy ship as its shields collapsed entirely. The dread was exposed. But the alien forces weren't going to roll over. "Incoming fire, Captain!" Taro's voice was tight with urgency. "They're retaliating." Mira's eyes flicked to the tactical display. A dozen enemy ships swarmed toward them, their weapons glowing bright with deadly intent. It was a trap. The dread had baited them in, knowing they could take a hit and retaliate with overwhelming force. "Brace for impact!" Mira shouted, gripping the console as the Elysium shuddered under the barrage. The ship groaned as it took hit after hit, the hull shaking violently. Red warning lights flashed, and the crew scrambled to maintain control. Mira's grip tightened as the console crackled, sparks flying across the bridge. "All systems are failing, Captain!" shouted Lieutenant Kellen, her voice a mix of alarm and determination. "We're losing power to the engines." Mira's mind raced. The Elysium had been in worse shape before, but this was different. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and they couldn't afford another direct hit. "Hold it together!" Mira barked. "Get us back on course. Full power to shields. Taro, bring those guns online again. We're not dying here." Taro's fingers flew across the interface, his face set in a grim line. "Shields up, Captain. Guns are back online." Mira's eyes flicked to the view screen, her heart pounding in her chest. The alien fleet had surrounded them. But they hadn't accounted for one thing: human resolve. Even as the ship's systems screamed in protest, Mira knew they were far from beaten. "Hold steady," she said, her voice steady as the ship rocked again. "We'll make it out of this. We always do." Her crew, battered but resolute, moved with a calm urgency that mirrored their captain. The Elysium might have been a relic, but it was still theirs. And as long as it was theirs, they would fight to the last breath. But the feeling in Mira's gut didn't let go. It was the weight of the situation, of the stakes. She knew they could win this fight, she had to believe they would, but the cost of victory might be higher than any of them were prepared to pay. As the enemy ships closed in, Mira's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden jolt. The ship lurched violently. They weren't just being hit by enemy fire, they were being pulled in. "Captain," Taro said, his voice shaking slightly, "we've been caught in a tractor beam. We're being pulled toward their flagship." The trap had sprung, and they were falling into it. Mira clenched her fists. "Not today! Bring the ship to full power. We're breaking free, or we're going down swinging." The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The Elysium groaned under the strain, its hull creaking as the tractor beam pulsed, pulling the ship closer to the alien flagship. Mira stood at the center of the bridge, the soft glow of the consoles illuminating her face. Her mind raced, calculating, thinking faster than ever before. They had no choice. They couldn't afford to be captured, not when everything hung in the balance. "Captain," Taro's voice cut through her thoughts, filled with a hint of panic. "If we don't break free now, the dread will lock us in its docking bay. Their boarding parties will take us before we have a chance to retaliate." Mira didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. The pounding in her chest, the heat rising in her face, told her everything. They were being herded like cattle into a slaughterhouse. "Is there anything we can do?" Lieutenant Kellen asked, her voice steady, but her hands gripping the console tightly. The fear was there, but it wasn't controlling her. Mira could see it in the lieutenant's eyes, the same fire that burned in her own heart. "We're not going down without a fight. Mira said, her voice low and commanding. She turned to face her crew. Taro, reroute all auxiliary power to the engines. Kellen, prepare for manual control. We're going to break this tractor beam or we're going to die trying. Mira's orders rang out like a battle cry, but even as she said them, she could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her. Every second that passed, they were getting closer to that massive ship, closer to their doom. She could almost hear the clanking of alien boots on the Dread's decks, closing in on them. Taro's hands were a blur as he worked. Redirecting power now. If I can get the engines running at full capacity, we might have a chance. The Elysium shuddered again, this time with more force. Mira stumbled, her hand instinctively grabbing the console to steady herself. The ship was being pulled in harder. The alien ships surrounding them were moving closer, their weapons poised to deliver the final blow. But Mira wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The Elysium's engines roared in protest as Taro pushed them beyond their limits. The energy of the ship's system surged, like the growl of a cornered animal. Mira's fingers dug into the edge of the console, her knuckles white. She could feel the strain in the ship's bones, could almost hear the metal groan under the pressure. Engines are at full capacity, Taro reported. We're not going to get much more out of them. It'll be a short burst of power. If it works, we'll break free. If it doesn't, we die. Mira finished for him. I'm ready for it. For a moment, the ship hung in the air, caught between two worlds, the infinite void of space and the metallic grip of the Dread's tractor beam. The quiet was suffocating, every heartbeat louder than the last. Mira could hear her crew's breaths, short, nervous, but filled with determination. Kellen turned to Mira, her face tight with concern. Captain, if this doesn't work, we might not get another chance. We need to prepare for boarding for the worst. Mira met her eyes, a fierce resolve settling in her chest. I've seen worse. We fight until the very end. The air was thick with tension as the seconds ticked by. Then, without warning, Taro slammed his fist onto the console. Now! Full power! The Elysium shuddered violently. For a second, Mira thought the ship was going to tear apart. The growl of the engines reached a deafening crescendo, and then, with a jolt that sent everyone stumbling, the ship lurched forward. The tractor beam snapped, its grip broken as the Elysium shot away, free at last. But it was far from over. Captain, we're surrounded! Kellen's voice cracked through the chaos. The alien fleet had closed in around them, their ships all pointing weapons directly at the Elysium. Mira's eyes scanned the viewscreen, taking in the scene. The enemy ships were massive, their weapons trained on them. But the Elysium was still alive. And as long as she had breath in her lungs, Mira wasn't going to let that change. Engage evasive maneuvers, Mira ordered. Taro, reroute all weapons to the front cannons. We need to make a path. Taro was already working, his fingers flying over the console. We don't have the energy for sustained fire, Captain. But I'll give you a shot. Mira didn't need to hear more. Do it. The Elysium's cannons fired with a raw, brutal force. The first blast hit an alien destroyer dead center, its shields crumpling under the intensity of the blast. The alien ship rocked violently, debris scattering into space. The second shot barely missed another enemy ship, sending it veering off course. Nice shot, Captain, Taro said, his voice tight with focus. Mira didn't smile. There was no time for that. Keep it up. We're not stopping until we're clear. The ship twisted and turned, dodging enemy fire, weaving between massive alien warships. The Elysium's movements were erratic, unpredictable, its old system struggling to keep up with the demand. But Mira knew this ship, knew it like she knew the back of her hand. It wasn't pretty, but it was theirs, and that made all the difference. The comms crackled, and the voice of the alien leader broke through, cold and taunting. You think you can escape us? You are nothing more than a dying species, clinging to the remnants of your ancient, pathetic vessels. Surrender now, or you will be destroyed. Mira's grip tightened on the console, her jaw set. You're about to learn that humanity never surrenders. With one final push, the Elysium broke free of the alien encirclement, streaking toward the safety of deep space. But they weren't safe, not yet. The dread was still hot on their tail, and the fight was far from over. The bridge fell into a heavy silence, the crew exhausted but alive. Mira could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on her. They had won a momentary victory, but the real battle was just beginning. "We need to plan our next move," Mira said, her voice low but filled with purpose. "This is just the beginning." And in the cold, silent void of space, the Elysium raced toward an uncertain future, the battle for humanity's survival far from over. The stars stretched into long streaks as the Elysium darted through the black void, a lone predator in the cosmic night. Mira stood at the bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display. The battle had taken its toll, the ship was battered, but it was still running. Every system hummed with tension. They were far from safe, but they had one advantage, the element of surprise. "We've shaken most of their pursuit," Taro said, his voice tight with fatigue, but there was still a flicker of hope in his eyes. "But the dread is still on our tail, Captain. We've got less than 10 minutes before they're within firing range again." Mira's gaze never wavered from the screen. "That's more than enough." Her crew had done the impossible. They had managed to escape, but they couldn't run forever. She had to end it now, or they wouldn't get another chance. They were close to the alien fleet's stronghold, the heart of their power. The enemy leader, the one who had orchestrated the brutal pursuit, still hadn't realized the full extent of the threat. He had underestimated the Elysium, just as so many before him had. But now, Mira was going to make him understand. "Lieutenant Kellen," Mira said, her voice steady, "we're going to turn the tables on them. Prepare the main weapon." Kellen, standing near the communications station, looked up sharply. "Captain, we don't have enough power for a full discharge. The main cannon will overload the reactor." Mira turned to face her. "I know. But if we don't, we'll never make it out of here alive. Set the charge. We'll give them one shot they won't forget." A heavy silence fell over the bridge as Kellen moved to work, her fingers dancing over the interface, inputting commands with a steady focus that spoke to her training. She looked up, meeting Mira's gaze for a split second. "Charging now. It'll take about 5 minutes to fully power up. We're cutting it close." "We don't have a choice," Mira said, turning back to the screen. "Keep an eye on our rear. Let me know the second dread is in range." Taro looked over at her, his brows furrowing. "Captain, if we fire the main cannon, we'll cripple the Elysium in the process." "Are you sure about this?" Mira met his gaze. "We don't have time for second guesses. We'll survive. We have to." As Taro nodded, the crew moved in sync, their movements precise, practiced. But there was a quiet weight in the air, the tension of knowing they were staring into the abyss, and this was their final chance. The silence was broken only by the hum of the ship's systems and the occasional beep of a status update. Outside, the dread loomed, a massive ship trailing them like a shadow. The enemy had regrouped, and Mira could feel their determination. This time, they weren't going to let the humans escape. But Mira wasn't going to let that happen. She wasn't going to let anyone erase humanity. "Not today." 5 minutes, Kellen said. "Reactor's almost ready." Mira nodded, then turned to her tactical officer. "Taro, get me a clear line to their command center. I want to send a message." Taro hesitated but then complied, his fingers flying over the interface. The comms flickered to life, and Mira's voice cut through the static. "This is Captain Mira Sato of the Elysium. You thought humanity was a joke. Well, here's the punchline." There was a brief pause on the other end, the enemy commander's voice coming through with an icy calm. "You are persistent. But it ends here, Captain. You're surrounded. Surrender, and perhaps we'll allow your people to live." Mira smiled darkly. "You don't get to decide that." With that, she cut the transmission. It was a declaration of war, and there was no turning back now. The crew tensed, the countdown ticking on the display in front of them. "Ready to fire," Kellen reported. Get us into firing position, Mira ordered, her voice calm, despite the chaos that loomed. We need to hit their reactor with everything we've got. Taro's hands flew across his console, the ship responding with sharp, calculated movements. The Elysium shifted positions, lining up with the Dread in the distance, the cannon aimed straight at its heart. The seconds felt like hours. Locked on, Taro said, his voice strained but steady. We're in range. Fire, Mira ordered. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the ship shuddered violently, the entire structure of the Elysium vibrating as it released everything it had in a single, earth-shattering blast. The main cannon roared to life, an explosion of brilliant light, and the ship rocked back on its heels from the recoil. On the viewscreen, the Dread seemed to pulse, and then, an eruption. The reactor exploded, a burst of energy that consumed the alien flagship. The shockwave rippled through space, knocking smaller ships off course, sending debris scattering across the void. But the Elysium wasn't unscathed. The ship trembled violently, alarms blaring as the energy backlash caused severe damage to the hull. The crew was thrown forward, and the lights flickered. Mira's heart pounded in her chest. We did it, Kellen said, breathless, staring at the view screen. We actually did it. Mira nodded slowly, but the victory felt hollow. The Elysium was torn, the main cannon now drained of power, and the ship was in no condition to fight again. But they had done it. The Dread was gone, and with it, the alien threat had been shattered. Get us to the nearest safe zone, Mira said, her voice quiet but firm. We're not out of the woods yet. But we have a chance now. Her crew moved with quiet determination, working in unison to stabilize the ship. The fight wasn't over, but the war had changed forever. Humanity had just shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and Mira knew that this was just the beginning. The Elysium would survive. And so would they. As the ship slowly limped away from the debris of the Dread, Mira looked out at the stars, her mind already on what lay ahead. There was a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, the horizon seemed just a little bit brighter. Humanity had fought. And humanity would continue to fight.